We were at the home of the famous writer Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings in Cross Creek. And my name is Elaine Carson Spencer, and I'm here today to share my excitement and legacy of my father and mother, Robert E. Carson and Estelle Carson, who were the first hosts here at Marjorie Rawlings' home in 1968 to 1970. What happened was my mother took they were both educators. My father was a professor of humanities at the University of Florida, and my mother was a school teacher at Stephen Foster Elementary School. In 1967-68, my mother decided to take off for a year. And just before that, in 1966, my dad's very good friend, Gordon Bigelow, was writing a book of Marjorie Rawlings' literary career, and it was called Frontier Eden. He asked my dad, "Hey Bob, wouldn't you like to do the illustrations for my book?" And my dad said, "Sure." So in 1968, they had an autograph party here at the creek in Marjorie's home. They had so many people here. They had the Times, the media people, newspaper people, the Gainesville Sun, of course, the Jacksonville Times-Union, Tampa Tribune, and many more. And they had hundreds of people here for that. My family, we came from Fort Lauderdale then, and we were all here for that wonderful moment and signing the book. My dad was excited too because he did all the illustrations, and he had met Marjorie some years before that because he was a teacher at the University of Florida, and she came to some of the classes to share her literary writings to the students. So my dad had invited her to come to one of his classes, so they had met. So after the book signing of Frontier Eden, the University of Florida were looking for someone to be a host of her home because they got so many calls from the publicity of these newspapers, and they said, "We need to find someone who knows Marjorie, who knows her writings, that would be willing to come out and give tours." Well, my dad asked my mother, Estelle, "How would you like to go out to Cross Creek and live in Marjorie's home and give tours on the weekends?" And she said, "Well, I think, okay, well, let me think about it." Well, she started thinking about it, and she said, she took off a year from school teaching. She said, "Oh, this would be wonderful not to have classes, not to teach, and to be able to go out to Marjorie's home and to live in this historic home of this famous author and give tours." So they came on Friday afternoons, packed up their bags, and lived here for 2 years, came on Friday and left on Sunday. They did this for 2 years. They gave, so many tours. And the exciting thing is, in 1968, when they first opened the doors, they decided to do this on 4th of July, 1968. They didn't know if they'd have anyone come at all. There was no publicity, but 300 people showed up. They were so surprised. 300 people. They were signing the guest book and bringing their books that they had from the yearling. They were busy every Friday and Sunday. They were so busy. But at night, which was nice, they were able to go to the yearling restaurant. And they became very, very good friends with the owners, the first owners for many, many years, Ben and Lillian Wheeler. So my dad, of course, he was a violinist, so he brought his fiddle. He played in the Symphony Orchestra, but he could play the fiddle too, and play old songs that people remembered down by the old mill stream and songs like that. And so he would serenade the guest, and soon after that, Cross Creek and the yearling was hopping. People would come out in droves to see her home and then go to the yearling. My father was still teaching at the university, so he had to finish that year of teaching. And so that's what they did, and he was a fantastic, wonderful guy. He loved life. he enjoyed Marjorie's writings, and he was an English literature PhD person, but he loved music, and he was a self-taught artist. So that's why all the illustrations in the book. And from there, my father died from a car accident leaving here in 1971. But my dad's legacy continued with my mother. And then after my mother died, I continued, and I'm still continuing his legacy, and hopefully my children will too. She was unique. I wish I had met her. I wish I could be in my father's skin many years ago, and when she came to his class, I would love to have met her, but I didn't meet her. I just know her through things I've read about her and the books that I've read and all the places she's been and people that she's met and people that she's had out here at her farm, in her house, famous people. I mean, she could be friends with someone down the street who just lived out here. She was a cracker. She became a cracker. And here she was from up north, and she came down in her fine clothes, but she wanted peace. She wanted to be able to write, and she did. And can you imagine years and years ago that there was no air conditioning, nothing like we have today, sitting on the porch, writing every day for hours and hours. I think her legacy is what's brought so many people here, and me too, because I knew who she was, but until you actually come out here and see her home, see the farm, and hear her readings, and read her books, that's when you really, really realize what a talented lady she was. She was very, and loved nature, obviously. She loved being outdoors. She loved nature. She wanted to get close to the earth. And actually, when she grew up, her parents had a farm, so she went out to the farm, so she was used to being around chickens and, growing vegetables, and so she had that taste in her mouth. And when she married Charles Rawlings, she said, I'd really like to get away from here, get away from the busy humdrum of the city life. And so Charles's brothers had a place here, and they found this piece of land with a farm on it, and they came down to look at it, and she bought it sight unseen, and she spent many, many days and hours and years here. And so not only did she love nature, but she was a female writer, and other women looked up to her, really looked up to her, because not many women were doing that then, were writing then. And so more followed suit after that, and they have continued. When we came to the autograph party that was here for Gordon Bigelow in 1968, my family came, and my daughters were younger, and I was, 25, 26 years old. And we all looked at the house, went through the house. They loved the openness of the screen doors, of the doors going all the way around the porch, and the breezeway. And when my parents lived out here, we came one weekend, and my parents invited my daughters, their grandchildren, to stay out there with them. And so they lived in the guest room, Marjorie's guest room. So I told them they were special too. And because famous people have stayed in that room, Robert Frost and Spencer Tracy, Gregory Peck, and the writer of Gone with the Wind, Margaret Mitchell, and many others came here to stay and visit, because Marjorie, actually one of her talents, another talent, was cooking. She loved to cook, so she would entertain. She sure would. She had a fantastic book that she wrote, Cross Creek Cookery. This is so exciting. Here I am in Marjorie's home, getting ready to go into the kitchen, and where my father and mother, Bob and Estelle Carson, were the first hosts. My parents had many memories in this kitchen talking about Marjorie and her love of her cooking. When they were here, they made homemade biscuits and had jelly, and had coffee or citrus juice, orange juice, for everyone, and so people actually got to see and taste some of her homemade biscuits that were homemade for sure. And then my father would also, he was an artist, a self-taught artist. So he did sketches, he brought his watercolors, and he would paint outside, and he would give them away, right and left, he would give them away. And my mother said, Bob, he said, well, I enjoy it. And they seemed to really enjoy it because they want to take something from her home, of her place where she lived. So that's what he did too. And I'd like to carry on my Marjorie's legacy through my father and through his artworks of many sketches that he did, especially the ones loved were the house, Marjorie's home, and Cross Creek, and at the bridge. Here we are in the living room, Marjorie's living room, and it's beautiful. And in the 30s, here she decorated beautifully. She had a really good taste and very elegant woman. But she can be down to earth too, from what I hear, and relaxed. And she was kind to everybody, and but she had a little zest in her too. And she loved life and loved people, but she was a serious, serious writer. And every day she would get up in the mornings and write for hours. Anyway, she would entertain here. This is her home. Please come in, she'd say. And she was very innovative. As you look at the light here, it was an upside down salad bowl. And she was very unique of how she's going to find things here out on the creek where there was no one except a few neighbors nearby, and that was it. Dirt roads, no air conditioning, all the things that we take for granted now. She loved magnolias. She had them on the paintings all over the house, and she loved the sweet smells of citrus and the birds. She loved birds, red birds, and to this day, red birds or cardinals. We have a lot of them in Gainesville and in Cross Creek. So they're still here, and all the chickens and everything's the same as it was. And that's very special to me. And everyone that comes out, they get to see how she actually lived and where she lived and how she wrote. We're in the display room of Marjorie's home, of all the books that she wrote. And many of them are transcribed into many other languages. It can be from all over the world, from Finland to all over Europe to Asia to, all over the place. Isn't that amazing? So many people loved her writings, and especially the book of a little boy named Jody and his fawn. So that's very special to be here. I'm standing in front of the bridge at Cross Creek, where my dad painted and did a pen and ink sketch, and two of his most well-known pieces of artwork. One is of the bridge and one is of Marjorie's home. So this is why it's very important for me to carry on my father's legacy and Marjorie's too. This bridge is very central to Cross Creek. It is the place where everybody met to settle disputes, and they came together and they all met at the creek, and they couldn't leave without shaking hands and settling the dispute and agreeing on something. So this is where it all happened. I feel very proud when I come out here that I've had some tiny, tiny, tiny part in this through my parents and through my parents knowing Marjorie, and for my parents living out here and actually living in her house, sleeping in her bed, cooking in her kitchen, giving tours. And I came out here many times then along with my family, and that's why it's important to me. And I will do this through my dad's paintings and talks that I give about him.